Welcome to another episode of the Growth League podcast. I'm here with my guest, Mac Christian. He's the Chief Marketing Officer at National Land Realty based in Boise. Yeah.
Home office is actually based out of Greenville, South Carolina. I am
Okay.
in Boise.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the show, Mac. Glad to have you here.
Yeah, good to be here.
So let's start here. When I met you the first time, you talked about, you're kind of a marketing nerd, a kind of a marketing geek, and you love What is it about the role of leading a marketing function in a team that has, I guess, called you to spend your time doing this? What is it?
Yeah, so the the big thing for me in leading a team and the whole reason I ever wanted to be in a role of leadership was I wanted to create the type of environment that I wanted to work in. I think that's if that's not the reason you're going into leadership, and if it's not to build up your team, like if it's a power game, you shouldn't be there. But for me, it was like there was always this environment that I was like, this is the ideal environment, and if I couldn't have it, I was going to make it. So that was kind of that's kind of how I ended
That's
up here.
awesome. And make it you sort of did. I seem to recall, and correct me if I'm wrong, but when your journey brought you to National Land Realty, there was a scenario in which the team dynamics and the sort of resourcing structure wasn't the way you envisioned it, and it was pretty costly. I think it was pretty bloated.
Yeah, yeah. So
Tell
so
me.
they grew really fast, and they had the growing pains that every fast growing company has. They had a lot of vendor network, vendor partners that they worked with. They had very little internal supporting staff, and they wanted somebody to kind of come in and sort of audit their system. And what I found was a lot of excess cost. Vendors can get pricey, and if you have the capability to pull internal, you can work really scrappy, and that's basically what I wanted to set up. So I had the opportunity to kind of just blow the whole thing up, and
Yeah.
which I mean, I don't know how you are, but like the chance to be like, okay, I get to blow this whole thing up and make it how I think that it's risky because if you have the wrong idea, you're going
Right.
down with the ship. So that was the intimidating part about it. So I did. I just got a chance to come in, build up the software stack from ground zero. We had some technology that we had internally that I had to integrate with, so there was a lot of like tech stack integrations that I had to run. And then I had the chance to hire my whole team and train them and get them kind of like built out. So
That's the
um,
dream.
yes.
So if someone was compelled to do this or had I guess the mandate to do this at another company, is there any word of warning or advice around like being conscious of when to do something like this? Should it happen really fast? Should it be in a lull part like, or is it just kind of like there's no better time to start than yesterday?
Tread very lightly. I came on board and made changes, and I was really fortunate enough to have read the first 90 days. I recommend that to anybody who gets into
Totally.
a leadership position is, man, you just lean the seat back and be along for the ride if it's in the first 90 days as a leader. The number one, first and foremost game you're going to play, unfortunately, in a leadership position is going to be politics. There is and it's not because organizations are inherently political. It's because an organization has a built-in structure that you are going to upset because you're new.
Right.
And if
Right.
and if it's the whole biological thing, right? If something changes in a biological system too fast, the white blood cells come out and they
Right.
attack the new thing. And so you have to be integrated into their system. So that was the first thing is gaining trust was the biggest part. I bit it off piece by piece. Like I talk about it, like I got to blow the whole thing and build my
Yeah.
team
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
it took me like 2 years.
Right.
So it's a big long game that you play. And all it is hey, here's something I see that can be more efficient. Hey, here's something, this is a role that I need.
Right.
This is the system, and this is why I need these roles in these places. And if I don't have that, it's going to cost you this much money. How can we get there? And so
Yeah.
you have to, if you do it all at the same time, it's not like that. I seldom see that go well. So,
Yes.
and I've learned from my own mistakes, right? Like I've tried to go in and do things too fast. I tend to work fast, and I've made that mistake, and it blew up in my face. So
Oh. Yeah, but if you're not making those, you're making them at some point. It's better if you made them in the past, right?
Right? Yeah, I would rather, yeah. I've heard that.
So if I heard you right, it's like, maybe a thought for marketers who are in the same spot is if you're coming into a new scenario within that first 90 days, first just get immersed and just start to get a lay of the land, build understanding and empathy and connections and allies and just kind of level set. Then it sounds like you sort of built a business case around what does change look like and kept your eye on that prize, but then it's about at the right time, systematically, thing by thing, not just
Yeah, you have to move incrementally because if if change happens too fast in any system, you start picking up resistance. And you have to pick up your victories as you move along. So if you're making a change, sorry, I'm getting a call here. If you're making a change, you've got to be able to go in and form your own case studies because I don't care who you got hired from or what you did or what giant organization you came from or what degree you're packing. No one cares.
right.
It's what you do right now in this organization. And if you come in too fast and do something, it's you start picking that up. So you build your own case studies internally. Like I did this, it
Yeah,
did this. This is
that
now a
makes
success.
sense. That
This
makes
is my
sense.
next one. Here's my next success. And then as you pick those up, you gain trust. And if you don't go in first and foremost seeking to learn, it shows. I mean, if
Yeah.
because it's one of those like they talk more than they listen. If that's
Oh
who you
God.
are, it's not going to go in your favor. Your employees won't respect you. Your coworkers aren't going to respect you. You
Yeah.
run everybody over. Like that's
Yeah.
shut up and sit back and, do the thing.
Well, that was kind of the you kind of just wrote the quick textbook on how to spend the first 90 days. It makes
I just
logical.
abbreviated 90 days.
There you go. Don't have to read it. Now let's pull back a bit and maybe give the listeners an understanding of what do you see to be the accountability or the mandate on the marketing function at National Land Realty? Like when the dust settles, what must this function accomplish to be
Um,
considered doing a good job?
yeah, at National Land, so it's a two-pronged effort. For number one, and the one that gets the most spotlight is lead gen. Lead gen is always a thing.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's a combination of lead gen brand awareness that we run. And the other part is sales enablement because that's where we sort of run an in-house support system. That's what the principle of our company was built on supporting our sales teams.
Yeah.
And I don't view sales as a separate entity from marketing. I view them as two parts of the same process.
Mm,
And taking that mentality to our sales team and getting them the tools that they need, the training that they need, and simplifying their process, making their life easier is a part of what we do. And we have a massive process system for all kinds of things that we do
yeah.
internally to support our sales teams. And it's weird too because a lot of sales teams are employees and in real estate they are not. So you cannot tell them what to do and you
Right.
can't make mandates. So it's like you've got to corral things a little bit. And so there's a fair amount of internal sales work. I want you to change how you run your business because they're all business owners. Anything that we do that changes our process, we're asking them to change their own personal business. So we've got to sell to them too.
Right.
It's sort of there's a lot of complexity to it, but that's kind of what's fun about it.
So practically, it's an organization that's for the most part very sales led, and a big chunk of the mandate is to mobilize, empower, sort of like amplify those levers. Is there anything that you think about running? How do you say it? Running parallel to that sales support that doesn't have a ton of sales team crossover, but is important for like planning tomorrow's pipeline.
So help
So
me
my
out here.
question is like,
Yeah.
how much of the day and how much of the week is crossed over purely supporting sales versus how much is like farming opportunity for them to yield later?
Yeah, yeah. So it is I we run about 60% support.
Right.
It's more 50-50. It depends. To be honest, it depends on the week, right?
Yeah.
So
Right. Right.
so we function off of a request system basis. We're basically an internal agency for the agents. So
Right.
and we have a do not say no policy. I want
Good.
I keep on I've said this for 3 years and I'm waiting for the agent that comes in and wants to run like an airplane banner or something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I'm like
Is that a no?
They haven't done it yet. And no, I would find a way to do it.
That's funny.
I love finding ways to do things. I don't know if there's ROI on it or anything like that. I would let
Yeah.
the agent pay for it and they get to figure it out. But we will design it and execute it and help them.
Yeah.
Uh, the the workload is about 50-50. Um, and it depends on the week because if we get a ton of work from agents, so we get weird weeks where we get too many requests. I have my team built on a flag system. If you're overloaded, flagged immediately. And then, so like if design or copywriting flags, I'll step into the design role and I step behind the designer to where the designer's telling me what to do.
You're
And
right.
I'm running him for QA or copywriting, like the director and I will both step in and run some copywriting, digital, like we all kind of will shift
Yeah.
based on our workload. Which is and the fact that we can do that is really cool. But yeah, so we run and the roles of the different individuals on my team are kind of geared towards that. So we have a couple roles that are primarily focused on the sales enablement side. We have a couple roles that they end up working most on the lead gen side, and that's
Okay.
mostly our digital marketer and stuff like that.
Got it. Yeah. Thanks for the context. So about team, um, I can tell you're pretty passionate about this idea of team and understanding that a giant part of your function is to grow and empower and lead the people part of it. So, what's generally been your approach to cultivating culture and effectiveness amongst a team of unique people?
I I'll take culture over talent every day of the week.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean I discount talent. But if somebody's great at what they do and they suck to work with,
Right.
I don't want them on my team.
Right.
I don't care how great they are. If they're difficult and they can't collaborate, if they hoard projects, if they the backroom talk kind of stuff, if they create a non if they create a non-open atmosphere,
Right.
meaning like if they're cutting people down or if they're chippy or stuff like that. Like those are things I go after immediately. And I've had them on my team and we've had our talks and
Yeah.
you know, because people are people and they're always going to be people, but
Yeah.
it's like, and you can be like, there's been instances of like, okay, like this is done. Like whatever it is, this is what I need on the team and this is what we are. But the and unfortunately, I don't have to. It's like that's like
That's a
it's
feel
weird.
thing.
It's so non-existent. It feels weird to talk about because it's
Right.
making a mountain out of a molehill. But I'm not going to pretend it hasn't happened. So I create mantras on the team. Like I want them to work fearlessly. Like that's all something I always say. I always
What does that mean? I want them to work fearlessly. Tell me about that.
so the second half of that is like we work fearlessly and we learn from our mistakes
Okay.
because I want and I expect a team to make mistakes. To me, the worst environment ever is when somebody's afraid to make a mistake because it's that fear of, and then that limits creativity, that limits new ideas.
Right.
The other part of that is like it doesn't mean you're free to make mistakes. Like right,
Yeah.
like you make your mistakes, learn from it once. If it happens again, now it's a habit, right? So it's
Right.
like so you have to be able to button up mistakes when they happen. But if you're afraid to bring them up in the first place, you're never going to resolve them, and you don't
Right.
move quickly.
Right.
So I want mistakes to happen to the extent of we can identify and solve them, and there's no chastisement. And what I wanted was an environment where team members could bring their mistakes to the table in front of the rest of the team, and that's the most vulnerable part of working in any team.
Right.
And I have I feel like I've stumbled across the finish line because I had a philosophy and it worked, right? So yeah, I don't know that I didn't have this genius plan or anything, but it's cool. Like our team, like call outs aren't even a thing. Our team is usually like, hey, I did this. I didn't get the right keyword density in this article. I think I need to go back and refresh it. Hey, I ran this campaign. Our conversion rate is fairly low. I think I'm going to try something new. Are you okay with that?
Yeah.
And we're always kind of doing that. And what I wanted was that's what I wanted in an
Yeah.
environment.
Well, you said part of the what drew you to this opportunity is the dream of being able to create what you would want to
Yes.
have in a work environment, right?
Yeah, because everybody's had a crap boss that makes them afraid to open their mouth in the
Yeah.
office, right? And nobody it. I don't know how it's so weird because we all have that story. And it's like, how many of those people got in charge of a team? Because everybody hates them. Like,
Yeah, 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 totally.
how does that happen?
Well, good for
Um,
you, man.
yeah, yeah, no,
You
I
talked
enjoy
about the flag system. I'm curious about that because I mean I think every lean, quote unquote lean marketing team at some point will be faced with some level of capacity constraint. So what's your playbook on dealing with that topic, this idea of capacity? And there is a constraint at some point, and but we still want to achieve great things. How do you navigate that?
Yeah, to me, that's it. A big part of that is right butt in the right seat. Um, if you get a grinder on your team, they're apt to overload themselves.
Yeah,
I'm also lucky enough to have a whole crew of grinders, which is which is great. I spend most of my time saying like, "Hey, call that one off. Step
yeah,
back.
yeah, yeah,
I don't want to." Yeah, but you're gonna fold. So it's a lot of that on our team, but it is it's if you have an environment of sort of it's weird saying vulnerability because it sounds like everybody's crying on meetings or
yeah,
something
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. It's
No, I hear
not.
you.
But where people are willing to be really honest, where it's like, okay, I've been trying to do this, I'm starting to get behind because the concept that I always pound in is that if you're moving reactively, it doesn't matter when, it's gonna happen, you're gonna screw something up. And so if you're moving too fast, failures are going to happen. That's when
Mhm,
failure happens. And
mhm.
so uh, usually it happens, you let somebody fail a couple times and then you get to the root of it. And 99% of the time, it's I'm moving too fast.
Yeah,
And then, okay, you need to call this out. We have this here. This is the structure we have to support you. If you don't call this out, this is going to continue to happen.
right.
And and so now it's just like I know they're going to work hard. I know that they're going to push too far. And I know they're going to call it out when it gets to be too much. And that's all a trust thing. To get there is sort of like it's a bumpy road, but you can get
Yeah.
there.
So you've been pretty successful, it sounds, in going the internal team member route, which I love. Anytime you can have that sort of culture being built and that over time they get more tribal knowledge. Tell me why doesn't the or why hasn't the contractor or the agency or the vendor model, why doesn't that work in your playbook?
So number one for us is cost. It's
Right.
it's it, it it's so cheesy for me because it's like we run such a lean thing and the way that real estate works, right? So in real estate, the model is the agents go out, they make the sale, percentage of that sale goes to the supporting brokerage. They want to work to the supporting brokerage depending on what they think is one, their best split.
Yeah.
And because the brokerage absorbs all the liability, all the responsibility, they're going to be sued, not, like
Right.
it's those kind of things. So money goes to them for support, and then they enhance the area around them um, to sort of build this network. And with that comes different models, right? So like some of them have a TV show, some of them have like it depends on what it is. We
Yeah.
chose to do a really thick, robust, like supporting system. Um, for us, I think I went down the rabbit hole there a little heavy. Remind me, sorry.
No, well, I mean, you know what? It actually brings up an interesting second question related to it is like just philosophically and from a preference standpoint, let's pretend cost wasn't an issue. For
Yeah.
you personally and the way you play this game, why do you err towards the side of I want to build this team versus relying on external expertise?
Yeah, I don't have a gravitation towards any direction.
Okay.
I view everything around me as tools and solutions to problems.
Right.
So I have built marketing capabilities almost completely reliant on vendors in the past because that made the most sense.
Right.
In this particular case, employees in-house made the most sense for the cost structure and the way that we had to field our team because of like the request system that we have
Right.
from agents. We needed somebody who was responsive and on call most of the time.
Makes
And
sense.
that's difficult to do with a vendor partner because they have to dedicate time to other clients. If you move to a dedicated model, you're going to pay even more. And
Right.
so, because vendors usually make their money by being able to service multiple clients quickly.
Right.
And for us, we have to be responsive quickly, which means being on call. So that was the
Makes
solution to the
sense.
problem.
No, that's a great way to dissect sort of the right, because I mean, every marketing leader at some point comes to a decision making time where it's like we got to find the right resourcing model, and a lot of times they go with their preferences compared to what you're really doing here is now understanding the uniqueness of the business structure and then building appropriate to that. But you don't have one preference one way or the other. It's about what is right for the economics of the business and the nature.
Yeah, yeah. Almost everything I've ever done has been that way. Like, what's the
Yeah,
need? How's it fit? Like, I mean, the whole concept of sales enablement, like I say it now, like I know what I'm talking about, right?
yeah,
We had sort of a marketing production support team that was really reactive. And I was just looking at the problem of like, how do we stop being so reactive?
right,
And there was this concept, like, agents in the field, it's this struggle of how much you're going to do for me versus how much do I have to do for myself to run my business.
right.
And so it was this push pull thing, and it's like, how do we get ahead of that? And I stumbled on an article about sales enablement and then went down the hole for like 3 months, like
Yeah.
trying to understand the concept and popped out with this idea that I started feeding to the company. And so it's always that kind of process for me. I know everybody has their systems, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, speaking of systems, you told me about a term that I've never heard before, but can you explain what dirtbag marketing means?
I was
And
gonna say, oh crap, that means I made it up if you never heard it. So yeah, I was joking about being a dirtbag marketer, and I love it because everybody I've ever said it to has responded with like, oh, I don't know if I would use that word. Like,
I like
oh,
it.
that means I'm using it for the rest of my life. Like that's
Yeah.
this one's
Oh, I
this
see.
one's
Yeah.
mine. So when I was coming up in school, I grew up in a ski town, and we idolized the skiers that would hop in a van and go from hill to hill and like work out of the back of the van, live there and ski for free if they could, and like cook and wash it. Like we wanted to be that.
Yeah, yeah,
Now,
yeah.
now that I'm an adult, obviously I'm glad I'm not doing that. But when I was really young and had no concept of a career, that was my thing, and we always called them dirtbag skiers. And it was a
Yeah,
compliment. Like
yeah,
being a
yeah, yeah.
dirtbag skier was a compliment in that realm of like, what do you do? I do everything I can to ski. So I took that, I just call it for marketing. And it's like if you're in a marketing role and you're really, really lean and you always have to be budget conscious, you have to be a dirtbag marketer. You have to
Right.
do things. You have to wash the dishes to be able to get up on the mountain, right? So it's you just find ways to solve problems that other larger teams with larger budgets don't have to worry
Right.
about.
So it's creativity, it's innovation.
It is.
None of this works if there's no level of trust though, or vulnerability as we talked about, right? Because being scrappy and innovative, creative, that's going to leave a lot of trail. That's going to leave a lot of tracks behind it, right?
It does. And scrappy is the right word. It's just not as fun to say.
Yeah, I know, and everyone says it. So I think
It
we
is.
got a
It
book
is.
there. So Mac, for you personally, like as you've come along your journey as a marketing leader throughout your career, what have you seen that you'd be comfortable enough sharing as, hey, this is my superpower? People that would say this is Mac's superpower, something you rely on all the time. You keep going back to it because it's just innate in your ability to play this role.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know about superpower, but when I was first on board here, we had a CEO. We've gone through a CEO transition as I've been here. And I wasn't on board for very long. And he sat me down and he had me basically just, it was a test, right? He basically gave me like a piece of paper I had to fill out. And it was, I want you to state why you exist. And it was it was one of those like it's like those are always kind of like fluffy questions like what is your thing
Right?
and like but it was like why do you exist is a pretty powerful question. I was
Yeah.
like, okay. And it took me a couple weeks, and uh I had to really kind of go into who I am, and because I wanted to answer honestly and be genuine.
Yeah.
And what I came out with was to learn, create, and communicate.
Learn, create, and communicate. Okay.
I'm obsessive about learning, and that helps me stay in tune. And I get my best ideas when I'm throwing on a podcast, and I'm like, I'll sit down at night and I like to paint, so I'll like paint
Okay.
something and like throw on the podcast. Um, I have a creative background. so that feeds into it well. And communication, being able to take calm and communication. I feel like communication is something that people say when they just talk a lot.
Yeah,
And
no, no,
and to me, the communication side is more, can you take something complex and make it very simple?
right.
And if you can do that, then that's to me that's true communication.
Yeah,
Um, and I've been able to do that. And if I couldn't do that, I couldn't take a team and align them.
right.
I couldn't get concepts across to the sales team or leadership. Uh, those things, for my personal superpowers, those are I feel like that's in line. I also have kind of a freakish energy level. It kind of weirds my team
That's
out.
good.
So,
And what about on the flip side? Like what would you say is the Achilles heel?
uh, impatience, moving too fast. Uh, my weaknesses are keeping it a high level. So I have to have so my director of marketing is my like right hand, like ride or die. You
Yeah,
are you're the reason I do things I can. So my director is very like extremely detail oriented. Like it's like they're the person that's going to go through the legalese and dissect
yeah,
it
yeah,
and like you know, this thing is off by this much and let's get this man. If I don't have somebody like that to counter my weaknesses, then I'm weak, right?
right.
Um,
Strength partners. Yeah,
yeah, and like everybody has to know their personality type. If you don't know your weaknesses, you're flying blind. And I'm pretty aware of mine. I've been married for a while, so I'm very
yeah.
aware
Well,
of my
that'll do
weaknesses.
it.
It'll do it, right? So those are mine. Moving fast, not taking time to go through the finer details. It's like it's but I do stay at a fairly high level when I'm
Well,
moving on things.
I
So
think
those
it's an interesting point because I think those only become weaknesses if you don't surround yourself with the strength partner that has those as superpowers. And if you try to start to live into and do the things that you're weak at, that's when they're a weakness. If they sit idle, they're not really a weakness, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, again, we learn from our mistakes, and I have made more than my share. And so yeah, I've you either keep making the same mistakes or you fix them,
Yeah.
and I'm lucky that I've been able to recognize them, I guess.
Let me ask you this: with the so not including things like your typical metrics and KPI reports and all of these things, what do you personally rely on to when you are done work for the day, you're painting, you're listening to a podcast, you're going skiing, what do you rely on to know whether or not you did a good job that day or that week or that month? Like what do you rely on in that regard?
Yeah, so uh I I used to always crack up when because for the last like I don't know like 15 years you couldn't even get a job in marketing unless you had the tagline of data-driven marketer.
Oh my God,
Um
yeah, yeah,
yeah, and it's so silly because it's if you're doing your job you're using data, right?
yeah, yeah.
Otherwise you're just
The cost center.
I don't know. I don't understand it. I don't know. I always laughed at it, but data has to be behind anything that you do. We keep a pretty monster spreadsheet of KPIs. And what I wanted to do with my team is I gave everybody their lane. Like if you are copy, I want you tracking blog traffic. I want you tracking time on page or engagement or you know Universal Analytics has changed to
Yeah,
GA4 and everything. So it's
yeah,
a
yeah,
little bit of that has changed as far as metrics that we're measuring. Um, but everybody's got their lane that they track and then they consolidate. And then I build out a monthly report that goes along with all of our KPIs. And I track way before I arrived here, like back to like 2016, actually. I pulled our analytics for that. And I'm
oh,
looking, I don't believe in that whole, but it does give you sort of a large format picture. The stuff that we look at is really like we're looking month to month. And it has to do with each different thing and what the objective of it is, right? So in our paid campaigns, we want to get people in lead to agent. Like that's the job, right?
right,
So we build out from open rate on down and we iterate incrementally from that stage,
right,
right? If my open rate sucks, but my conversion rate's okay. I'm not going to worry about the conversion. How do I get that open rate? A/B test it, see what you can run,
Yeah.
build it out from there.
So
Yeah,
and
yeah.
less academic than I'm curious about like something more felt inside of just you, Mac. Like
You're okay, okay.
yeah, so not relying on
Philosophically,
on a data set, but how do you know like when you're skiing, you're like, shit, I'm doing a good job. But it's not in reference to a set of KPIs.
uh, one is I can feel it on my team, and
Yeah.
you don't always hear it from your team, but you can see it. Like if you have some kind of human emotional intelligence, you can see whether people are up or down. Um, you can tell when you're leaving them behind because they don't engage as much. Like there's that. Like if the camaraderie is there, uh, that tells me like things are clicking. You can see it and you can feel it. Um, we see and feel it immediately from our field team because no one's going to fire shots across our bow faster than our agents in the field.
Yeah, I
When
imagine.
you have 400 sales-minded individual people that we're working with, you're going to have shots across the bow if you're failing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty routine thing for people to be frustrated because of that many sales agents. The big one for me is we just had our national conference, and I had more people that I thought were dissatisfied with marketing come up to me and shake my hand and compliment what we did than I could possibly expect. I was really, really just humbled. I didn't know how to react, to be honest. Like, it was one of
Yeah.
those like, whoa, you know, I
That's awesome.
so there's things like that. You can kind of you got to read the waters. You can tell when people are overwhelmed. If your team's unhappy, they're probably not working well.
Yeah.
And also knowing that that's going to be a cycle on your team. Everyone has down cycles, and everybody on your team is going to take a dive at maybe 2 to 3 times, 4 times, 5 times a year.
Yeah.
They're going to go into one of those unproductive cycles. I think
Yeah.
everybody does. And being ready for it and not chastise for it and work with it, like somebody's going through a life thing, somebody's going through their kids are sick or their parents are ill or they're depressed.
Yeah.
Those conversations happening and being like, cool, how can I support you?
That's
Those kind
awesome.
of things. Paying
That's
attention to
leadership,
that,
man. Yeah.
you keep them, like they amp up and they get back out there. So I don't know.
That's awesome. I love it. I love it. Here's a tough one for you, and I'm only asking it because I think you're pretty comfortable in your own skin. But for fun, what would have to happen for Mac to get let go from his job, to get fired,
Uh,
in your opinion?
yeah, yeah. An HR complaint, right?
Besides an HR, yeah, yeah,
If I sexually harassed a coworker, I think that that would go.
yeah.
So I mean, we'll start there.
From a business sort of
I
business
know, but I
objective,
wanted the low hanging fruit.
I
It
love
was
it.
so easy.
Yeah.
From a company perspective, if I neglected where the money goes, like
Mm,
number one is money. If we were losing money, um, if I if I disengage, right? If I let my team fall apart,
yeah,
that that to me, if we stopped producing leads, those are all things. And part of it's hard because we're so seasonal and so economically driven. Like
yeah,
you
yeah,
will
yeah,
gain and you lose leads depending on the market. So it's hard. Even when we're successful, it's hard for me to claim it. It's like,
yeah.
did were we successful or did interest rates become favorable?
Yeah, and that's all.
Did
That's all
land-in
the
values
game.
drop?
That's the game conditions we have to play, right? But I love what you
Yeah.
said is if the team is disengaged and what you said first is so it's so obvious, but we forget. So many marketing leaders forget it. It's where does the money go? Like where does it flow? What is the like every dollar in marketing, in my opinion, has to have a job. Every dollar spent has to have an intention or a job. And losing sight of that is kind of the first indicators of things like random acts of marketing and marketing becoming a cost center and all of these things that untether marketing from the foundations of the business. And I think that's
I
awesome.
think, yeah, I think everybody's interpretation of marketing is we just light money on fire and throw it in a trash can.
Yeah,
It's like, oh,
yeah,
what's marketing? Well, I saw the Super Bowl. Did you see those commercials?
yeah,
That
yeah,
one
yeah.
with Seal. Oh my gosh. people think it's stuff like that, and it's like, no, oh no, marketing is way more boring than that. Like we're talking, are you tracking your consumer lifetime value? Well, I don't have to worry about that because nobody, it's very rare that somebody buys multiple ranches. So
Yeah, right.
it's a little more difficult on our end for consumer lifetime value, but we have it, right? We do have return customers. The the Yeah, I'm
I like
trying to
it.
think of,
No, I
yeah,
like
I'm
that.
trying
Where
to
does
think
the
of.
money go? And is my team, is it no longer a place that I'd want to work at? And was I a part in creating that?
Another thing I repeat to my team all the time is like, if you ever have any doubts, you live in the one career where you have to prove your own existence every single day you go to work.
Right.
And like, you have to. You have to prove why you exist in this company. Like, I make this much money. I actually have them,
I
um,
love
I,
that.
I help them, I help them build argument cases for raises if they want them.
Yeah.
Um, so like, and it's like people get them, but if it's something that you feel you deserve, uh, you build you build your case, and we'll review it. And it's like, I want you to show on paper, I provided this much money for the company.
Yeah.
This is what I did, and this is how it contributed to the bottom line because that's why you exist.
And
And
hopefully they get the raise, but even that exercise I imagine is hugely beneficial because it's reflective and it's right.
yeah, if you see on paper how much of an ass kicker you are, like it makes you